Jeff Chandler was one of the biggest stars in Hollywood, but all of that ended quickly and shockingly in 1961. The story told by the government was easy, maybe even too easy. So why do people still have questions after all these years? Come with us as we look into the Hollywood story that wouldn't go away. The rise of a star. Ira Grossell gave birth to Jeff Chandler on December 15, 1918. He was born during a tough time in American history. Like many people during the Great Depression, his family lived in Brooklyn, New York, and had a hard time making ends meet. He grew up in a working-class Jewish family where things were often hard. There wasn't much money, and the future wasn't clear. But Chandler was already talented in art and very interested in the performing arts when he was a young boy. He was interested in acting and sharing stories from a very young age. In a time when families were just trying to stay alive, it wasn't easy to follow these interests. But Chandler was determined in a way that made him stand out. He didn't give up when things got tough. After finishing high school at Brooklyn's Erasmus Hall, which is known for turning out many bright artists and entertainers, he chose to follow his dream of becoming an actor. He signed up to go to the New York City Fagan School of Dramatic Art. He started to study acting more seriously there. Taking part in school plays helped him feel better about his skills and learn new ways to use his voice and body. Chandler clearly loved acting and was determined to get better at it. He knew that having skill wasn't enough by itself, that he needed to learn, be trained, and have skill. Chandler put his playing dreams on hold to serve his country during World War II. He joined the U.S. Army and was sent to the Aleutian Islands, which are far away and hard to get to. Even though it was hard, being in the military gave him discipline and mental toughness, which were both very important. Chandler went back to normal life after the war was over. He had to figure out what to do next, like many soldiers do. It was clear to Chandler what the answer was: performing. He first worked in radio, where people noticed his deep, rich voice right away. In the 1940s, radio was still a big way to have fun, and Chandler's baritone voice stood out. He always had work as a character in radio plays. He learned new things and built his reputation in these jobs. His voice became his business card and helped him get jobs that led to him making movies. He got his big break in movies with a small but important part in Johnny O'Clark in 1948. His strong voice and quiet determination worked well for the part of a tough gangster he played in the movie. People in the business talked about it, even though it wasn't a lead part. It didn't take long for studio executives and film critics to notice him and start offering him bigger parts. When Broken Arrow came out in 1950, it really changed things. Chandler played an Apache chief named Cochise in this movie. Chandler gave the part his all, even though it was hard and complicated. He didn't play Cochise as a stereotypical bad guy, but as a proud, smart, and caring boss. The performance was strong and full of honor. At a time when movies often showed Native Americans in an unfair way, Chandler's respectful and human image was a big change. Even though he had a great rise, things would not go smoothly in his personal life after that. Fame comes with a price. When Jeff Chandler became famous in the early 1950s, he had to work a lot and deal with a lot of stress. He quickly became a star that Universal Pictures could count on. The studio always knew he would give great shows, and he almost never let them down. But being successful cost him in ways that hurt both his health and his family life. Chandler signed a tough deal with Universal Studios that said he had to make 2 movies a year. This might not seem like a big deal, but each movie took months to plan, film, market, and finish. Chandler did more than just act. He also sang and went on public events. It wasn't just a side project. They kept him in the public eye and took up even more of his time. There were always practices, talks, and trips. He was also under a lot of stress because Chandler had his own production business. Over time, this busy routine got too much to handle. By the middle of the 1950s, it was clear that all this late-night work was having an effect. At the time, Chandler's wife, actor Marjorie Hosel, said that he was always tired. She said that he would fall asleep in public places or during talks. Not only was he physically tired, but he was also emotionally tired. He was so tired from all of his duties that he wasn't always mentally or emotionally present, even when he was there. To him, his mind was always somewhere else, weighed down by the next task or due date. In 1946, Jeff Chandler married Marjorie. At the same time, his work in Hollywood was beginning to take off. She used to be an actress, but she finally left the spotlight to focus on their family. They had 2 daughters. Donna was born in 1949, and Jaime was born in 1947. When I first saw them, they looked like the perfect Hollywood family. But there were big problems going on behind the scenes. There were many ups and downs in their marriage. They broke up in 1951, but they tried to get back together. It was too bad that the same problems kept happening. In 1954, they broke up again, and Marjorie asked for a divorce, saying the marriage was too broken to fix. She said that Chandler's extreme tiredness was a big problem. Not only was he tired, he was also emotionally and physically absent all the time. She said that he would get lost in his work and not spend much time with her or their kids. In 1955, the couple tried to make things right again and got back together for a short time, but it didn't last. Chandler began seeing actress Esther Williams in public in 1957, while they were shooting a movie in Italy. For Marjorie, this was the last blow. It was the second time she filed for divorce, and this time it would last. The split was finalized in 1959. During the court case, Chandler's wealth was made public. In 1957, he made about $250,000. That was a lot of money back then. In 1957, he got $60,000 per movie, and in 1958, he got $75,000 per movie. He also made money by singing and doing public events. But even though he made a lot of money, he wasn't financially stable. A lot of his money was spent quickly on things like agent fees, manager commissions, legal fees, and the costs of living. Chandler agreed to pay more than $2,100 a month in alimony and $500 a month in child support as part of the divorce deal. He also gave a one-time payment of $100,000. These numbers show how seriously the courts took his debts, but they also show how much stress he was under. He was overworked in every way because he had to take care of his public image, his family, and his high-pressure job. It became clearer over time that Chandler was losing his mind and body. He was known to fall asleep on set or at social events. A lot. It wasn't because they were lazy, it was just plain tiredness. His co-workers noticed that he was always tired, and people who knew him well said that he seemed mentally worn out. On breaks, he wouldn't spend time with his family. Instead, he would go to his job. His wife said that he worked, wrote, planned, or ran his business all the time in his spare time. He wasn't really there, even at home. Later, Marjorie told me that she got an ulcer while they were married, which is something that doctors often associate with a lot of stress. Their relationship was taking a huge toll on her emotions, and it showed in her body. She was hurt by Chandler's departure in more ways than one. It was making her sick. By the end of the 1950s, it was clear that Jeff Chandler's personal life was bust. His health and happiness had suffered because of his fame and wealth. People in Hollywood and his friends looked up to him, but behind the scenes, he was having a hard time keeping everything together. And just when things seemed like they were getting out of hand, he had a scandalous relationship that made his personal life even more public. Affair of love and gossip. On screen, Jeff Chandler may have seemed calm and sure of himself, but his real life was a lot messier. Chandler's love life got more attention after his marriage to Marjorie ended. This was especially true for the tabloid press, which was getting meaner in the 1950s. He was already under a lot of stress at work, and having his love life looked at by everyone made things even worse. One of the most talked about parts of Chandler's personal life began in Italy in 1957, when he was shooting Raw Wind in Eden. He began an affair with actress Esther Williams on the set. Williams, a big-name Hollywood star and past swimming champion, quickly became a major figure in Chandler's life and in the news. It wasn't exactly a secret that they were dating. The news spread quickly, and Chandler's wife knew the marriage was over. Later on, Williams' voice would be one of the most controversial in Chandler's story. Williams made a shocking claim in her book, The $1,000,000 Mermaid, which came out in 1999. She said Chandler had asked her to marry him, but then he told her he was a transgender person. Williams says this news was the end of their relationship. The claim was very strong. The public and the media were totally caught off guard, and there were a lot of reactions right away. People had always thought of Chandler as a strong, traditionally male figure. People thought of him as a tough main man because of his height, gray hair, and deep voice. Many people found it hard to believe that he could have a private life that was so different from how people saw him. Chandler's friends and co-workers in Hollywood spoke out quickly and deeply. A famous actor and close friend of Chandler's, Jane Russell, spoke out in defense of him the most. She said she didn't like the idea at all. "Cross-dressing is the last thing I would expect of Jeff," she told me. "The man was really nice and all man." Others in the business agreed with her that it was impossible. A lot of people thought the claim was too strong or not clear. Some people thought it was wrong to make such a private accusation public. Chandler had been dead for decades, so he couldn't protect himself. The things Williams said, whether they were true or not, led to rumors that would follow Chandler's reputation for a long time after he died. Chandler had ties to other people in the business besides his relationship with Esther Williams. He was seeing actor and singer Gloria DeHaven, but they didn't tell anyone about their relationship. Besides that, he was related to Ann Sheridan, who was another well-known Hollywood star. Even though none of these relationships were ever proven, they did make people more interested in his personal life. It was even worse in the 1950s because of the trashy media. During this time, magazines like Confidential were at their best. These newspapers loved scandal and weren't afraid to break the rules. In one case, Chandler and Gloria DeHaven were watched by police to find proof that they were having an affair. At that time, these kinds of attacks were common. People would often follow celebrities around, take pictures of them, and write about them without their permission. Chandler was one of many stars caught up in this new wave of attention. Chandler's life was already very busy and stressed, but the press made things even worse. Not only did he have to handle his job, but also how people saw him. He made a public image of being strong, sure of himself, and reliable. Things were not so easy behind the scenes, though. Chandler's life was full of ups and downs in his feelings, failed relationships, and growing stress over how people saw him. Over time, the news stories stopped, but what happened next would show a fact that was even worse than the rumors. The shocking death that didn't make sense. Jeff Chandler went to Cedars of Lebanon Hospital in Los Angeles in May 1961 for surgery to fix a slipped disc in his back. A lot of people had this type of spine surgery, and it was thought to be safe. He had been having back pain for a long time, which was probably made worse by the physically demanding movie parts he played. The surgery was suggested by his doctors as a way to improve his quality of life and keep working without pain. It was thought that the treatment would be easy, but something terrible went wrong. Chandler's health quickly got worse over the next few days. He got sepsis, a serious blood infection that made things worse because his body couldn't fight it off. Jeff Chandler passed away in the hospital on June 17, 1961. The stated cause of death was complications from surgery, with an infection being the main one. The news shocked Hollywood and broke the hearts of his fans. He was only 42 years old, in good shape, and still working. Just a few days after going to the hospital for a simple surgery, how could a man be dead? The official story of what happened was at first believed by most people. But soon there were more questions than answers. Chandler's close friends and family were the first to have questions. He had been married to Marjorie for many years and knew her well. She was very worried about how quickly he had gotten worse after the surgery. In the months before his surgery, she said he was tired and stressed, but never really sick. She didn't understand why he died so quickly. Even friends and fellow players were not sure what was going on. Some people said they had talked to him right before the surgery, and that he seemed happy. A rumor spread that something bad happened in the operating room, but no one was willing to say what it was. A close friend of Chandler's, the famous singer Sammy Davis Jr., sent a very worrying report. Davis said that a hospital nurse had told him in private that there had been chaos in the operation room. According to reports, she said Chandler had seizures during surgery, and that the doctors and nurses didn't seem ready for what happened. It became more popular to think that something bad had happened behind closed doors. Others talked behind Chandler's back about how he is known to be allergic to some medicines. People who knew about his medical background said that he had told doctors about certain drug allergies, especially to penicillin. Most people at the time didn't pay much attention to these early worries. The hospital made a standard comment, and the story stopped being in the news. But people who knew Chandler best kept having doubts about the official story. They thought that someone or something had missed, ignored, or hid something. There were years when no one could answer the question, but it never really went away. Then, after many years, Chandler's daughter Amy Tucker worked hard to bring new information to light. As an adult, she started to look into her dad's medical background. She asked for years to be able to see his locked hospital records because she was sure that the truth was being kept from her. She finally got to see the files after a long court battle. What the records showed was very upsetting. Chandler did say on his medical forms that he was severely allergic to penicillin. Even so, he was given an antibiotic with penicillin in it either before or after the surgery. It wasn't a simple mistake. It went against what was known to be his medical needs. The records also showed that no right steps were taken to watch him for allergic reactions before, during, or after the surgery. This mistake could have been deadly on its own. A person who is allergic to penicillin can get anaphylaxis if they come into contact with the drug. Anaphylaxis is a severe and sudden reaction that can make it hard to breathe, cause a drop in blood pressure, cause seizures, or even cause you to lose awareness. It can be fatal if not treated right away. The newly released papers say that Chandler did start to show signs of distress soon after taking the medicine. He started to bleed and have seizures, but hospital staff allegedly did not act quickly or give him the right care. His body couldn't handle the allergic response and the internal bleeding at the same time. Within days, he got sepsis, which destroyed all of his organs and killed him. The records also showed that there was a concerning lack of contact between the medical teams. Notes were made by nurses about how he was reacting, but they weren't quickly used. In some files, it looked like staff members were even unsure of who had given permission for the medicine. The worst thing that was found out was that Chandler's death could have been avoided if his allergy had been taken seriously. He probably would have lived if the staff had been better prepared and if they had been able to talk to each other more clearly. Instead, a well-known star and loving father died because of carelessness and poor management in a hospital that should have been safe. Also, it became clear why the truth had been hidden for so long after these news came out. Cedars of Lebanon Hospital had to keep up its good name. At that time, studios and hospitals often worked quietly to stay out of trouble. Chandler had a deal with Universal Pictures, and his sudden death brought up a lot of questions. They would lose a lot if the truth came out, especially about one of their biggest stars. People think that both the hospital and the studio tried to hide the facts so as not to get in trouble with the law. The real story of how Jeff Chandler died is finally out there today. It was more than just a terrible accident. The mistake was made by a person. Warnings were not taken seriously, and the system was more concerned with fixing problems than keeping patients safe. Chandler didn't die by accident. People did not listen or act when it was most important, and he died. When the whole truth came out, it also showed the bigger problems that Hollywood didn't want anyone to see. We'll talk more about that soon. It's hidden in Hollywood. When he died, Jeff Chandler still had a job with Universal Pictures. There was more to him than just acting. He was a star that the companies could always count on. Chandler had very important parts in history epics, war dramas, and westerns that made a lot of money. During the golden age of Hollywood, studios loved to push traits like strength, honor, and traditional masculinity. His appearance on screen stood for these things. Chandler's fame was very important to Universal's business. A scandal about his death would have been bad, especially one involving possible medical malpractice or reports about his personal life. During that time, studios saw their stars as investments. It was good for business for them to keep them safe while they were living, and it was even better for business to control the story after they died. Universal had strong ties to the media, the police, and the medical field. This meant that the company could control what was shown and what was hidden. That was the price they were willing to pay to hide mistakes or not answer questions. Image in public was very important. Because of this, Chandler's death was reported in a simple and quiet way. Problems with surgery. No one looked into it, the press didn't ask any questions, and there was no sign of crime. Everything stayed in its place and tidy. That's how Universal and most of the other big companies at the time wanted it. The hospital where Chandler had surgery also stood to lose a lot. It was one of the best hospitals in Los Angeles, and a lot of famous people had been there. A well-known death caused by medical negligence could have done a lot of damage to its image. Later information said that the hospital staff knew Chandler was allergic to penicillin. He was still given the medicine, though. Because of this mistake, someone had a severe allergic response that caused seizures and internal bleeding. He never got better. But at the time, none of this was made public. Instead, hospital papers were not clear. Some reports were changed, and others were not even sent in at all. The public wasn't able to see important papers like allergy warnings and nurse notes. Chandler died of complications after surgery, but the official cause of death didn't say anything about the allergic reaction or the lack of right response afterward. These records were kept secret for many years. Families usually can't see private medical records unless they go to court and fight for it. Years later, Chandler's daughter had to do the same thing. Then people found out the real story of what happened in that surgery room. At the time, though, no one had publicly said they were at fault, and there were no investigations or cases. The hospital protected its name, and the people who made the mistake didn't get in trouble for it. In Hollywood, there were always rumors going around, even though the official story never came out. Some people in the business world knew what happened, or at least heard about parts of it. People who worked with Chandler heard rumors about his allergic response, the botched surgery, and the chaos in the operating room. Some people thought it was carelessness. A few people thought it was worse. Still, almost no one spoke out in the public. Why? If you lived in Hollywood in the 1960s, you were very loyal. People were careful about what they said, especially if it could hurt a studio or put important people on the spot. Speaking out could hurt a person's job. Journalists were often told not to dig too deep into stories that could hurt the image of the industry. Back then, investigative news wasn't free or backed up like it is now. Behind the scenes, private investigators, press agents, and studio officials all worked to keep the news from getting out. Even when they thought there might be a scandal, tabloids like Confidential and others didn't blame hospitals or big companies because they knew it could hurt them. There was too much risk. Some people, like Sammy Davis Jr., told others what they heard, but most kept quiet, either out of fear, duty, or pressure. The cover-up went on for decades because of this silence. The worst part is that Chandler's family didn't find out what happened until years after he died. His kids didn't know the whole story as they grew up. His ex-wife carried her sadness and anger without finding peace. The public was also not told anything. Jeff Chandler's case wasn't the only one like it. During the golden age of Hollywood, it was normal to cover up things. Studios hid DUIs, affairs, mental health problems, and in this case, what might have been a wrongful death. Sometimes hospitals, especially ones that treated famous people, cared more about keeping their good names than telling the truth. Truths don't stay hidden forever, even when people don't say anything. And Chandler's fame would grow in ways that no one saw coming. The truth is found by Jamie Tucker. Jeff Chandler's death was a riddle for decades because of unclear answers and sealed records. The stated cause, problems after routine back surgery, never made the people who knew him best happy. His daughter, Jamie Tucker, was one of them. In 1961, she was young when he died. But as she got older, she wanted to know more. What started out as a personal quest to understand how her father died turned into a determined quest to find the truth and bring to light a failure that had been kept secret for too long. There was always something off about Jamie Tucker's story about how her father died that she wasn't told. She heard rumors from family, friends, and people in the business over the years. Some whispered that mistakes were made in medicine, or that something went wrong during surgery. Others said there might have been an allergic response that wasn't taken into account, but there was no solid proof. Chandler's medical papers from Cedars of Lebanon Hospital, where he had surgery, were locked up. Cy wasn't allowed in, even though she was his daughter. "You didn't give up, though." She started to look into it. She asked for papers, made official requests, and met with lawyers. There were even people who had worked at the hospital in the 1960s that she wrote to and talked to. It felt like she was hitting wall after wall at times. Institutions were either not willing to work with them or had already moved on. A lot of records were lost, stored, or kept out of reach on purpose. Without making a fuss, Jamie kept going for more than 20 years. She wasn't famous or well-known. In her childhood, she didn't have a father and didn't know what to do. Her goal wasn't to get back at someone or make news. The reason was to tell the truth and treat her father with respect. People had been petitioning and going to court for years before Cha finally got something done in the late 2000s. The court agreed to let her see her father's medical records from the days before and after his treatment. Because of the law, the hospital had no choice but to follow through. What you found broke her heart and made her feel better. The records proved what many people had already thought. It was known that Jeff Chandler was allergic to penicillin. In his record, that allergy was written down. The drug was still given during or soon after surgery, though. He had a severe allergic reaction called anaphylaxis, which caused him to have seizures, bleed inside his body, and finally die. Chandler's care after surgery also showed signs of not being careful. Strange reactions were written down by nurses, but nothing was done fast enough. People didn't pay attention to the warning signs or follow the rules. Jamie also found papers that showed there was worry within the company at the time. Some staff members wrote things that showed they knew something was wrong, but those worries were not looked into or recognized. Instead, they were buried. Jamie found out about it in a painful way. Her dad hadn't died because of a chance problem with the surgery. His death was caused by medical carelessness that could have been avoided. Someone made a mistake, but they covered it up. Finally, having the papers in his hands, Jamie began to speak out. News outlets, magazines, and films asked her to do interviews. She always brought up one thing to remind people. He was more than a star. He was my dad. She talked about how tough it had been to grow up without him. How the confusion about his death hurt me emotionally and never fully got better. And how, even after decades, finding the truth made them feel both better and sad again. Even though she had accomplished her goal, it was painful to know that her father had died for no reason. Please like, subscribe, and share this video if you liked it. Watch out for the next big Hollywood story.